If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you I was one of the lucky ones. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 15 years, and together we had built what I thought was a solid, loving marriage. We had 2 amazing daughters, a comfortable home, and successful careers, Emily as a translator and me as a security guard. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. We laughed often, supported each other, and shared a deep history that I believed would always keep us together. Looking back, I can see the cracks now, the little things I brushed aside. Emily had always been social, but over the past few months, her Friday nights with her colleagues had become a regular thing. At first, it was innocent, just a few drinks after work, home by 8 p.m. But then, little by little, things started changing. She began coming home later, first by an hour or so, then sometimes not until 10 p.m. When I asked about it, she always had an excuse: we lost track of time, or we were just talking about work. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, my partner, the mother of my children. But something felt off. I could feel her slipping away from me, but I told myself I was overthinking it. I convinced myself that after 15 years, it was normal for things to change. That's the thing about trust, you don't notice when it starts to erode, not until it's almost completely gone. I just didn't know that my entire world was about to shatter. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was at work, sipping my coffee during my break, when I casually checked my email. Buried between spam and work-related messages, I saw something unusual: an anonymous email with no subject line. At first, I almost ignored it. These days, anything anonymous was either a scam or spam. But something made me open it. Maybe it was gut instinct, maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I wish I hadn't. Inside was a single sentence. Your wife isn't who you think she is. Attached was a photo. I clicked on it, expecting, I don't know, a prank? A mistake? Instead, my stomach dropped. There was Emily, in a dimly lit pub, laughing, no, glowing, as she danced closely with some younger guy. Her hands were on his shoulders, his arms wrapped around her waist, their bodies pressed together in a way that made my blood turn to ice. I zoomed in, hoping, praying, that maybe it was an old photo, a misunderstanding, some weird joke. But no. Emily was wearing the same blue dress she had left the house in last Friday night. Last Friday night. The night she told me she was just hanging out with the girls. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I felt detached, like I was outside my own body, watching myself slowly fall apart. My hands clenched into fists, and 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Who sent this? Was it someone trying to ruin my marriage? Or someone who actually cared enough to tell me the truth? And, more importantly, was this the only time? Or just the only time she got caught? I tried to breathe, to think logically. Maybe it was just an innocent dance. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew. I knew that kind of body language. That wasn't just a friendly dance. That was intimacy. That was something I hadn't seen from her in months. I wanted to call her right then and there, to demand answers, but I stopped myself. No. I needed more. I needed to be sure. So, I did what I never thought I'd do in my life. I decided to investigate my own wife. That night, I lay in bed next to Emily, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. I could hear her slow, steady breathing, completely unaware that my entire world had shifted. My mind replayed the image from the email over and over again, like a loop I couldn't escape. I wanted to shake her awake, to shove my phone in her face and demand an explanation. But what would she say? It was nothing. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't ready to hear her lies, or worse, her honesty. Instead, I made a decision. The next morning, I started paying attention. Emily had a predictable routine. She left for work at 8 a.m., took her lunch break around 12:30, and came home at 6 p.m. I never questioned it before, but now every detail mattered. That Friday, I told her I was working late and watched as she got ready for her usual girls' night. She spent more time on her appearance than usual, curling her hair, carefully applying makeup, wearing a dress that hugged her body in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I used to love how she looked when she dressed up. Now, I felt sick. She kissed me goodbye, a quick, practiced peck that felt more like habit than affection. I forced a smile, told her to have fun, and waited. The moment she was out the door, I grabbed my keys and followed. I wasn't proud of what I was doing. I never imagined myself as the kind of man who would tail his own wife like some desperate, paranoid fool. But trust wasn't something I had the luxury of anymore. I kept my distance, staying just far enough behind to remain unseen. She drove across town, parking near a cozy little pub, the same one from the photo. I parked a block away and waited. Minutes passed. Then, he showed up. The guy from the picture. Mid-30s, sharp-dressed, confident. He walked up to the entrance, and almost like clockwork, Emily stepped outside to meet him. They hugged. Not a friendly hug. Not the kind you give a coworker or a casual acquaintance. No, this was different. Her arms wrapped around his neck, his hands settled at her waist, and for just a second, just long enough for my stomach to twist into knots, their faces hovered dangerously close. And then, they walked inside together. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't some friendly after-work hangout. Emily was cheating on me. And I was going to catch her in the act. Sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached, I forced myself to breathe. My heart pounded against my ribs like a drum, the kind of heartbeat you feel in your ears, in your throat, in every part of you. This was it. The moment of truth. I had spent the last 15 years believing in Emily, in us. I trusted her with my life, with our family, with everything. And now, here I was, parked outside some dimly lit pub, watching her disappear inside with another man. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I got out of the car and made my way toward the entrance, keeping my hood up just in case. The inside was warm, loud, filled with people talking, laughing, clinking glasses. A band played soft acoustic music in the corner, and the air smelled like beer and fried food. And then, I spotted her. Emily sat in a booth near the back, leaning in close to him. She was smiling, her fingers absent-mindedly twirling a strand of her hair, something she used to do with me when we first started dating. He said something, and she laughed, touching his arm, her eyes sparkling like she was completely lost in him. I felt something inside me crack. I stayed in the shadows, watching as they ordered drinks, their conversation smooth and easy. She was relaxed, happy, in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe they were just friends. Maybe I was letting paranoia control me. Then, he reached across the table and took her hand. And she didn't pull away. She didn't pull away. I had seen enough. Turning on my heel, I stormed out of the bar before I did something reckless. My head was spinning, my stomach twisted into knots. I barely made it to my car before I had to sit down, gripping the dashboard like I might pass out. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't lie to myself. Emily was having an affair. The only question now was, what the hell was I going to do about it? I sat in my car for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. My mind was a chaotic storm of emotions, rage, confusion, heartbreak. I replayed every moment in my head, every little thing that suddenly made sense now. The Friday nights out. The late returns. The extra time spent on her appearance. The distant looks when I spoke to her. The way she pulled away when I reached for her in bed. I had ignored the signs because I trusted her. Because I never in a million years thought that Emily, the woman I built a life with, the mother of my children, would do this to me. But there she was, sitting in that booth, holding another man's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have stormed back inside, flipped the damn table over, demanded to know what the hell she was thinking. But that would have made me look desperate, weak, out of control. No. If she was lying to me, betraying me, I needed proof. So I made a decision. I picked up my phone and opened the camera. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to steady as I zoomed in through the pub's window. Click. A photo of them holding hands. Click. A second one, this time of her laughing as he tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. An intimate gesture. A romantic one. One that wasn't meant for me anymore. I felt sick. I kept watching, my stomach twisting with each passing second. They ordered another round of drinks, their bodies leaning in closer as if the rest of the world didn't exist. Then, the final blow. As I stared through the glass, I saw her take a deep breath, hesitate for half a second, then lace her fingers through his. Not a friendly touch. Not a casual gesture. A lover's touch. That was it. That was all I needed. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt, but I stayed frozen, my mind racing with 100 different thoughts. How long had this been going on? Who was this guy? Did she even love me anymore? Had she ever? And the worst one of all, had I already lost her long before tonight? I sat there, gripping my phone, staring at the proof of my wife's betrayal, and I realized something. This wasn't just some one-time mistake. This wasn't an accident, a drunken slip-up she would regret. This was deliberate. She had chosen this. And now, I had to choose what came next. I had two options. I could go home, pretend I hadn't seen anything, and live in denial. Act like the devoted husband, hold on to the illusion of the perfect marriage while she continued sneaking around behind my back. Or I could end this. I could confront her, make her look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 10:15 p.m. She wouldn't be home for at least another hour. That gave me just enough time to prepare. I took a deep breath, put my car in drive, and headed home. Because by the time Emily walked through that door tonight, she wouldn't just be facing her husband. She'd be facing the truth. And there would be no more lies. I sat in the dimly lit living room, phone in hand, the images of Emily and that man still glowing on the screen. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the walls settling. My daughters were already asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing within their home. I felt like a ghost, like a man waiting to bury his own marriage. The clock on the wall read 11:27 p.m. when I finally heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. A few seconds later, the front door creaked open. Emily stepped inside, heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. She set her purse down on the entryway table, stretching her arms as if she'd just had the most relaxing night of her life. She hadn't noticed me yet. Had a good time? I asked, my voice low and steady. She jumped slightly, turning to face me. I saw the brief flicker of panic in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a tired smile. Jesus, you scared me. What are you doing sitting in the dark? I didn't answer. I just stared at her. She hesitated, then forced a chuckle. Yeah, I had a good time. She paused, glancing at the clock. Wait, why are you still up? I took a deep breath, feeling my chest tighten. I know, Emily. Her smile wavered. Know what? I turned my phone screen toward her. The image of her holding his hand was still open. I watched the color drain from her face as her eyes locked onto the proof of her betrayal. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "Say something," I said, my voice eerily calm. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what she was seeing. Where did you get that? That's what you're worried about?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Not the fact that you've been sneaking around behind my back. Lying to me. Destroying our family." Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone, but I pulled it away. "How long, Emily?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "How long has this been going on?" She swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. "It's not what you think." I scoffed. "Oh really?" "Because what I think is that my wife has been cheating on me while I've been home with our kids, trusting her. What I think is that you've been lying to my face for God knows how long. But please, enlighten me." She shook her head quickly, her breathing uneven. "It's not serious. It's just a mistake. A stupid mistake." I felt something snap inside me. "A mistake?" I repeated. "Holding hands in a bar like teenagers. Lying about girls' nights while you're out with him. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I felt nothing. "Was it just tonight?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was long enough. I clenched my jaw, nodding. "That's what I thought." She wiped at her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I swear, it was just." "Don't." I cut her off. "Don't insult me with excuses." Silence filled the room. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating, unbearable. "Do you love him?" I finally asked, my voice quieter now. She looked up at me, her lips slightly parted, but no words came out. And that hesitation? That single moment of uncertainty? It told me everything I needed to know. My heart shattered in ways I didn't know were possible. I stood up, shoving the phone into my pocket. "I want you out," I said, my voice firm. Her eyes widened. "What?" "No, please, can we just talk about this?" "There's nothing to talk about," I said coldly. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "Ron, please," she sobbed. "I'll end it. I'll fix this. I love you." I shook my head. "No. You love yourself. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Tears streamed down her face as she realized there was no way out of this. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I didn't give her the screaming match she was probably expecting. Instead, I just walked away. Because at that moment, I knew, Emily wasn't my wife anymore. She was just someone I used to love. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the confrontation over and over again. Emily's face, the shock, the guilt, the tears. The way she had hesitated when I asked if she loved him. That hesitation was worse than any confession. I wasn't naive. I knew affairs weren't always about love. But the way she looked at him in that pub, the way she had smiled, the way she didn't pull away when he touched her, that wasn't just some meaningless fling. That was comfort. That was connection. And I had been fooling myself for months, pretending I still had her. I could hear Emily moving around in the guest room. She had tried to talk to me again before going to bed, but I had nothing left to say. My silence was the loudest answer I could give her. By morning, my decision was clear. I got up before the sun, walked into the bathroom, and stared at my own reflection. I looked like a man who had been gutted from the inside out. Eyes hollow, skin pale, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. This was what betrayal looked like. I splashed cold water on my face and took a deep breath. I needed to act. Downstairs, the house was eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after a bomb has gone off, and you're left sifting through the wreckage. Emily was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she probably hadn't even sipped. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, her face pale. We stared at each other for a moment. "Can we talk?" she finally asked, her voice small. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "I want a divorce." Her breath hitched. I saw the panic flash across her face. "Ron, wait." "No," my voice was firm. Unshaking. I had made my decision. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. The same hands that had held mine for 15 years had been touching another man. The thought made me physically sick. "Please," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Don't do this. Don't throw everything away over one mistake." "One mistake?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Emily, I followed you. I watched you hold his hand. I watched you lie to my face, week after week. This wasn't one mistake. This was a choice. A pattern. And I'm done being the idiot who pretends he doesn't see it." She broke then, sobbing into her hands, but I felt nothing. I used to think if something like this ever happened, I'd be furious. I'd scream. I'd break things. But now I just felt empty. "Where do we go from here?" she choked out. I exhaled slowly. "I don't know. But I know I can't stay married to someone I can't trust." She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight for us, but the damage was too deep. There was nothing left to fight for. "I want you to leave for a few days," I said. "Go stay with a friend. Give me time to figure out what's next." Her face crumbled. "What about the girls?" I swallowed hard. That was the one thing I hadn't figured out yet. "We'll tell them when we know what to say. But right now, I need space." More tears. More desperate glances. But she knew. She knew this was the beginning of the end. I turned away, walking toward the stairs. "Pack a bag, Emily." And I didn't look back. Emily left that afternoon. She didn't fight me on it, not really. She cried, she begged one last time, but when she saw I wasn't budging, she finally packed a small bag and walked out the door. I didn't watch her leave. I couldn't. The house felt hollow without her, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't grief I felt, it was relief. I could finally breathe. But the hardest part was still ahead. My daughters. They were still young, too young to have their world shattered like this. I had spent the entire morning trying to figure out how the hell I was supposed to explain to them that their parents were splitting up, that the family they had always known was about to change forever. By evening, I couldn't put it off any longer. They were sitting in the living room, their laughter filling the space like it always did. They had no idea that their lives were about to be divided into before and after. I sat down across from them, trying to keep my face neutral, but my eldest, Ava, immediately noticed something was wrong. She had Emily's sharp intuition, always able to pick up on emotions like they were written on my face. "Dad?" she asked, tilting her head. "Where's Mom?" My throat tightened. "She's staying with a friend for a few days," I said carefully. Both girls exchanged a glance. "Why?" I took a deep breath. There was no easy way to do this. "Mom and I," my voice caught for a second, but I pushed through it. "We've been having problems. Big ones. And we decided it's best if we spend some time apart." Silence. The kind that makes your heart crack open. Ava's eyes darkened. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked bluntly. I had always admired how direct she was. No sugarcoating, no avoiding the hard truths. I swallowed. "Yes." My youngest, Emma, let out a small gasp. She was only 8, too young to fully understand, but old enough to know that divorce meant something bad. Ava didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared at me with this heartbreaking expression, like I had just told her the sun was never going to rise again. "But why?" she whispered. I had prepared for this question, but how the hell do you tell your kids that their mother betrayed you? That she threw away 15 years for another man? I couldn't. "Because sometimes, love changes," I said instead. "And when it does, staying together isn't always the best thing for a family." Ava's lip trembled, and for the first time, she looked away. Emma, on the other hand, burst into tears. Big, gasping sobs that shattered what little strength I had left. I pulled her into my arms, stroking her hair, whispering that it was going to be okay. That I would never leave them, that even if things changed, we would always be a family. I wasn't sure if I was telling them that for their sake or mine. Ava wiped at her eyes. "Is Mom coming back?" I hesitated. "She'll always be in your lives. You'll still see her. We'll figure everything out together." "But not as your wife," she clarified. I shook my head. "No, honey. Not as my wife." Her jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw it, anger. Not at me. At her. She knew. Maybe she didn't know the details, but she had seen the distance. The late nights. The way things had changed. And she understood. She didn't say anything else. Just nodded once, stiffly, before pulling Emma into a tight hug. I had prepared myself for every possible reaction. Screaming. Begging. Even blaming me. But the quiet acceptance. That was the hardest part. I felt like a failure. Like I had let them down. But deep down, I knew the truth. The only person who had let them down. The first night after telling the girls was the hardest. Emma had finally cried herself to sleep, curled up against me like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. Ava, on the other hand, stayed awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, refusing to talk. I didn't push her. She needed time, just like I did. I lay in bed alone, staring at the empty space beside me. It felt foreign, like a gaping wound in the fabric of my life. For 15 years, Emily had been there. Even when we fought, even when things were tense, I had always known she was there. Now I didn't even know who she was anymore. I thought about all the nights she had come home late. The times she had kissed me absent-mindedly, like she wasn't really present. The moments she had been on her phone, smiling at messages that clearly weren't from me. How long had I been lying to myself? I forced my eyes shut, but sleep never came. The next morning. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen as I leaned against the counter, gripping the mug like it was the only thing holding me together. Ava walked in first, her face unreadable. She poured herself a bowl of cereal and sat down at the table without a word. Emma followed, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Is Mommy coming home today?" she asked softly. I hesitated. "Not today, sweetheart." She frowned. "Tomorrow?" I sighed, kneeling beside her chair. "Mom and I are going to figure out a new plan, okay? You'll still see her, I promise." Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. Ava, however, wasn't buying it. She set her spoon down and looked me dead in the eye. "Did she cheat on you?" The question hit like a slap. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My instinct was to protect them, to shield them from the ugly truth. But Ava was smart. Too smart. I exhaled. "That's something between me and Mom." Her jaw tightened. "So, yes." I didn't confirm it, but I didn't deny it either. Ava stood abruptly, dumping her half-eaten cereal in the sink. "I'm not hungry." Then she walked out of the kitchen. I wanted to call her back, to make her talk, but what was there to say? She was angry. She had every right to be. I just didn't know if that anger was directed at me or Emily. The call. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Emily. I debated ignoring it, but I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. I stepped outside, gripping the phone as I answered. Yeah. She hesitated. How are they? They know, I said flatly. Ava's pissed. Emma's confused. Emily let out a shaky breath. I should come over. We need to talk to them together. No, I said firmly. Not yet. They need space. I need space. She was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she whispered, I miss you. I felt nothing. I closed my eyes, letting the word settle, waiting for the familiar ache. But it wasn't there. I don't miss you, I replied. A sharp inhale on the other end. Ron, please. No, Emily. My voice was steady, final. You made your choice. Now you live with it. I hung up before she could respond. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I had control. And I wasn't giving it back. I don't know what I expected after that call with Emily. Maybe I thought she'd give me space like I asked. Maybe I thought she'd keep fighting to fix things, to win me back. But she didn't. Days passed. Then a week. And besides a few texts about the girls, logistics, schedules, nothing personal, she didn't call again. I should have felt relieved. Instead, it just confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't fighting for me because I wasn't worth fighting for. Or, more accurately, I wasn't worth fighting for anymore. The legal side of things. I spent the next week meeting with a lawyer. Sitting in that office, listening to the cold, clinical details of how to divide a life in half, made it all feel real. More real than the pictures on my phone, more real than the confrontation in my kitchen. We talked about assets, custody, visitation schedules. I signed papers that felt like death sentences, officially marking the end of what I had spent 15 years building. At one point, the lawyer asked, "Is this amicable?" I almost laughed. I don't know. Because, honestly, I didn't. Emily hadn't fought me on the divorce. She hadn't begged me to reconsider. If anything, she seemed resigned. And maybe that hurt more than the cheating itself. I wanted her to fight. I wanted her to show up at my door, crying, saying she had made the biggest mistake of her life. I wanted to see regret, real regret, in her eyes. But she just let me go. Like I was something she had already grieved. Like I was something she had already lost long before I even knew. Ava's breaking point. Ava hadn't said much since that morning in the kitchen. But I knew her silence wasn't indifference, it was anger. And then, one night, it finally boiled over. I was in the living room, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, when I heard a slam from upstairs. Ava's door. I got up, my stomach tight. I found her sitting on the floor, her back against her bed, her eyes red. "Ava?" I said gently. She didn't look at me. "I don't want to see Mom." I exhaled slowly, sitting down next to her. "I know you're mad." She lied, she snapped. "She lied to you. To us. And now we're supposed to just go have weekends with Mom like everything's normal." I sighed. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." She turned to me then, her face full of something I hadn't seen in her before, betrayal. "She didn't just cheat on you, Dad. She cheated on us." And just like that, I realized something. I wasn't the only one who lost someone. Emily had been my wife. But to Ava and Emma, she was everything. The woman who kissed their scraped knees, who packed their lunches, who tucked them in at night. And now, in Ava's eyes, she was a stranger. I pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her as she buried her face in my shoulder. I know, sweetheart. I know. I wanted to promise her it would get better. That one day, she'd forgive her mother, that things would feel normal again. But I couldn't lie to her. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure if any of us would ever be whole again. A week passed, then another. The house felt different, quieter, heavier. Like something vital had been drained from it, leaving behind a hollow space that none of us knew how to fill. Emily was still gone. I saw her only when necessary, brief, stiff encounters during custody exchanges. She would come to pick up the girls, standing on the porch like a guest in a house she once owned. I kept things short. No small talk, no lingering glances. Just the facts. The girls will be ready by 6. Emma forgot her sweater at your place. Ava has a project due next Friday. And that was it. No more I love yous. No more see you soons. Just two people who once built a life together, now treating each other like polite strangers. But the worst part? She didn't seem broken. I wanted to see her suffering. I wanted to see regret eating her alive. But every time she came over, she looked composed. Like she had already mourned this loss long before I even knew there was something to grieve. And that realization cut deeper than anything else. She had already let me go. She had already moved on. I just hadn't noticed. Ava's anger, Emma's confusion. Ava still refused to talk to Emily. She went to her scheduled visits, but she barely spoke. She sat in the car with her arms crossed, gave one-word answers, and spent most of her time in her room when she was at Emily's place. I should have told her to give her mother a chance. That people make mistakes. But I couldn't. Because the truth was, I was just as angry as she was. Emma, on the other hand, was struggling in a different way. She asked questions I didn't have the answers to. Why can't mommy live here again? Do you still love her? Did I do something wrong? That last one nearly broke me. I held her tight, whispering again and again that none of this was her fault. That even though things had changed, she was still loved, so loved. But I could see the confusion in her little eyes. She didn't understand how something that was supposed to last forever could just end. And honestly, neither did I. The unfinished conversation. One night, long after the girls had gone to bed, my phone buzzed. Emily. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something in me, curiosity, anger, maybe just the need for closure, made me pick up. What? I answered flatly. A deep inhale on the other end. Can we talk? I almost laughed. Talk. Now you want to talk. Her voice wavered. I don't know how to fix this. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. You don't. You can't. Silence. Then, softly, I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a bitter breath. Then you shouldn't have. More silence. More words left unsaid. I could hear it in her breathing, the regret, the sadness. But regret wasn't love. And sadness wasn't enough. I had spent months wondering if she'd ever feel the weight of what she had done. If she'd ever realize what she threw away. But now, standing here in the wreckage of what we used to be, I realized something. It didn't matter anymore. Because no matter what she felt now, guilt, pain, even love, it was too late. I took a breath, steadying myself. Good night, Emily. And for the first time in 15 years, I hung up first. The call with Emily lingered in my mind for days. It wasn't just her voice, it was the weight behind it. The regret, the hesitation, the desperate attempt to reach for something that was already gone. But I knew the truth now. Some things aren't meant to be saved. 2 weeks later, we met in person, for the last time as husband and wife. It was time to sign the divorce papers. The final meeting. We met at the lawyer's office. She was already sitting at the conference table when I walked in, her hands clasped together, her nails digging into her skin. She looked different, tired, smaller somehow. But it didn't change anything. The papers sat between us, cold and official. The end of 15 years, reduced to black ink on white paper. Neither of us spoke as the lawyer explained the final terms. Joint custody. No alimony. The house would stay with me, not because I wanted it, but because Emily refused to keep a home built on broken promises. She looked at me then, searching for something in my face. Some crack, some hesitation. She wouldn't find any. The lawyer handed us the pens. Whenever you're ready. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name in quick, firm strokes, like ripping off a bandage. Emily, however, stared at the paper for a long time. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. She signed slowly, each letter of her name heavier than the last. And just like that, it was done. The walk to the parking lot. We left the office in silence, stepping into the cool evening air. I could feel her next to me, her presence familiar and yet, foreign. Like a ghost of the woman I once knew. At the edge of the parking lot, she stopped. Ron. I turned, waiting. Her eyes glistened. I know you don't believe me, but I really did love you. I let out a slow breath, shoving my hands into my pockets. Yeah, I said. I loved you too. And then I shook my head. But love wasn't the problem, was it? Her face crumpled. I didn't wait for her to respond. I just turned and walked away. This time, I was the one leaving her behind. The first morning after signing the divorce papers felt strange. For 15 years, I had woken up next to Emily. I knew the shape of her sleeping form, the way she stretched in the morning, the scent of her shampoo lingering on the pillow. But now the other side of the bed was empty. And it wasn't temporary this time. It was permanent. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before forcing myself up. The house felt different, not just because she was gone, but because it no longer felt like ours. It was mine now. And that realization was both liberating and gut-wrenching at the same time. The girls adjusting. Ava barely spoke about the divorce. She still refused to go to Emily's place unless she absolutely had to. She spent more time with her friends, more time in her room, but I could see the storm raging inside her. One night, she finally let it out. I hate her, she said suddenly, standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I looked up from my book, startled. Ava. I hate that she did this. I hate that she acts like she's sorry, but she still ruined everything. Her voice cracked. I hate that I don't feel like I have a mom anymore. I set the book down and stood, crossing the room to her. Hey, I said gently. You don't have to forgive her right now. Or ever. But you do still have a mom. She scoffed. Do I? I sighed. She made a huge mistake. But she still loves you. And no matter how much you hate her right now, that's not going to change. Ava looked down, swallowing hard. I don't want to see her. I exhaled. Then don't. Not until you're ready. She nodded, rubbing her eyes before walking away. And I stood there, wondering how the hell we were ever supposed to heal from this. Emily's apology, too little, too late. A few days later, Emily showed up at the house. It wasn't her week to take the girls, but she texted me, asking to talk. I debated telling her no. But something in me, curiosity, closure, I don't know, made me agree. She stood on the porch, looking nervous. Can I come in? I leaned against the doorframe. What do you need, Emily? She hesitated, then sighed. I wanted to apologize. For real this time. I stared at her. For the cheating? The lying? Or for destroying our family? She flinched. For all of it. I crossed my arms. Why now? Her eyes darted to the ground. Because I lost you. And I lost Ava. And I think, she let out a breath. I think I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I let her words hang between us. In the past, I might have softened. I might have wanted to believe her, to comfort her. But I wasn't that man anymore. I don't need your apology, I said finally. Not anymore. Emily's face fell. Ron. I shook my head. You made your choices. And now you have to live with them. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. Instead, she just nodded, stepping back. Goodbye, Ron. I didn't say it back. I just closed the door. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt free. The days turned into weeks, and the raw sting of betrayal began to fade, not because I forgave Emily, but because I finally stopped letting her take up space in my head. I was done carrying the weight of her choices. But moving on wasn't easy. It wasn't some grand moment of realization, some dramatic rebirth where I woke up and magically felt healed. It was slow. It was messy. It was sitting alone at the dinner table, staring at the empty chair where Emily used to sit, and realizing I had to cook for just me and the girls now. It was scrolling past old photos in my phone and feeling a dull ache, a whisper of what used to be, what was never coming back. It was hearing our wedding song on the radio and not changing the station fast enough before the memories hit. But it was also learning to enjoy the silence. It was waking up one morning and realizing that I hadn't thought about her at all the day before. It was Ava coming downstairs, sitting across from me, and talking to me about school again, really talking. It was Emma laughing as I tried, and failed, to braid her hair the way her mom used to. It was the realization that even though the life I had built with Emily was over, my life wasn't. The first night out. A friend convinced me to go out for a drink. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. It's just a beer, he said. You don't have to meet anyone. Just remind yourself that there's still a world outside of this mess. So I went. And for the first time in a long time, I sat at a bar without feeling like someone's husband. I wasn't waiting for Emily to text me. I wasn't looking at my ring. I was just, me. A woman sat next to me at one point, smiling as she ordered her drink. She was pretty, not in a way that made my heart ache, but in a way that reminded me that I wasn't dead inside. She didn't flirt. I didn't flirt back. But for the first time, I realized that someday, not today, not tomorrow, but someday, I might be open to something new. And that? That was enough for now. Months passed. Seasons changed. Leaves fell, snow came, and then warmth crept back into the air. And through it all, I kept going. Not in some grand, cinematic way. Not with some profound realization that life was better now. But in the small, quiet moments, the kind of moments that used to feel insignificant but now meant everything. Cooking dinner with the girls. Laughing at something stupid on TV. Fixing a leaky faucet by myself and feeling oddly proud. Waking up and realizing I didn't feel empty anymore. Somewhere along the way, the pain stopped defining me. Emily and the girls. Ava started talking to Emily again, not because she forgave her, but because she decided she didn't want to carry the anger anymore. It still hurts, she admitted one night. But I don't want it to control me. She was stronger than I ever gave her credit for. Emma adjusted in her own way, bouncing between houses with an ease that only kids seem to have. She didn't see the cracks the way Ava did. In her world, Mom and Dad still loved her, even if they weren't together. And maybe that was enough. Running into Emily. It happened at the grocery store one afternoon. I turned the corner, and suddenly, there she was. For the first time in months, we weren't co-parents exchanging schedules. We weren't a broken couple signing divorce papers. We were just two people who used to share a life, now standing awkwardly between shelves of cereal and pasta. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied. She looked different. Older, maybe. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time in a long time. "How have you been?" she asked. I thought about it for a second. "Better." She nodded, looking down. "I'm glad." And the crazy part? I meant it. There was no anger left. No bitterness. Just the quiet understanding that we were never meant to grow old together. And that was okay. We said our polite goodbyes, and as I walked away, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't the center of my thoughts anymore. Moving forward. I didn't rush into dating. I didn't chase some grand idea of finding love again. Instead, I focused on myself. On my girls. On healing in a way that had nothing to do with revenge or proving a point. And one day, when I wasn't even looking, someone new came into my life. Not a replacement. Not a way to fill the void. Just a person who made me laugh. A person who saw me not as a man broken by the past, but as someone still capable of something more. And for the first time since that anonymous email changed everything. I believed it too.